Hey, I'm Eric Rokeach with FitnessBusinessInterviews.com, and I'm here with Josh Henkin, who's made a big name for himself by carving out one awesome niche. Now, a lot of people know about kettlebells, TRX, and how they're really popular right now, but Josh took his share of the pie by cornering the market with his training tool of choice, and that is the Sandbag. He's become the go-to guy for this niche, and he knows a ton of information about how to build businesses and give some great advice, and he's here to share all of that with us. So, Josh, thanks so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences with people, good and bad.
All right, very cool. So you are a strength and conditioning coach. Let's step back. Let's get a little background information about how you got into the industry before we can really dive into some of the details on the business side.
Well, I knew pretty early on that athletics was an industry that I wanted to become involved in and stay in for the long term. I also knew I wasn't blessed enough with the genetics to become a professional athlete of any sort, especially my sport of choice was basketball. So a little too short and a little too not tan enough. So, I wanted to become actually a coach for a while, and I actually did that. At the same time, I also became just very passionate about strength and conditioning after suffering a very bad ankle injury and then later on a low back injury. I saw how much strength and conditioning can make an impact on the performance. And, for myself, it allowed me to extend my career far beyond what I ever expected, especially because at the time basketball wasn't a sport that a lot of people spent time, strength training on, or there were a lot of misconception on how strength training for the sport. So for just being stronger than everybody else, I was able to prolong my career, and just, being passionate about that type of thing, I went into more and more detail. I wanted to find out more about it and the science behind it, and that's how I got into strength conditioning itself.
Okay, now you said you weren't that great of an athlete, but didn't you play basketball at Arizona State?
I did.
So you're pretty
I
good.
walked on the basketball team there, and again, like I said, superseding any type of expectation I ever had, and definitely learned what it meant, or what the different levels of athletes really took, and just the jump, seeing some very, very good high school athletes coming from Chicago to Division I sports in the Pac-10 at the time. It was just a quantum leap, and then seeing some of those athletes that would go to the professional level is just amazing how much better they are than everybody else.
Yeah. And so when you were at school, you were playing, you were an athlete. Were you studying anything on the exercise science side, or physical therapy type of things?
Yeah, I was going down the exercise science path. I really wasn't clear at that time if I wanted to go into coaching or basketball coaching specifically, or strength and conditioning. At the time, early on, I did, like I said, walked on, so I was really focused upon the maybe coaching side of things. I re-aggravated a little back injury that would end my career, and I think between just seeing how much of a business that level of sport becomes and the whole process of going through a bad injury sort of just, tired me out from the basketball side for a while. So I put a lot of my emphasis into the strength and conditioning, because that was something up to that point I only had very positive experiences with. It was one of those things, in sports you can train the hardest, you can practice the most, and you very well could not be even close to the best athlete on the field or court when it comes down to playing the actual game. In strength training, it seemed, though, you got a lot of the benefit that you put into it. So if you worked hard, if you were dedicated, you actually got that back, which was a nice thing, because it was also something, if you were intrinsically motivated, you could go really, really far with. So I kept becoming really passionate about that. But about halfway through, I started, getting into some non-traditional stuff that would be seen at the time. I started getting into the likes of people like Charles Poliquin and Paul Chek, who at that time were completely revolutionary in the industry. It was the first time they were writing for mainstream magazines, which was dramatically different than anything that was being put out at the time. The internet was just growing and just getting its jump. And I remember, my last couple of years just being is when testosterone launched on the internet, and just being just absolutely nuts about, every Friday, couldn't wait for the next issue to come out. And it was cool because it was so different than everything I was learning at school, and would cause some definite conflict, amongst my professors and what I was seeing that was actually occurring in the field. But it did enlighten me early on in the fact that if you wanted to be great in this industry, you had to think outside the box, and you had to think about doing things different ways to ultimately become innovative and successful.
Absolutely. Now, once you were in school, you started getting into the strength and conditioning side of things. As you wrapped up, what was the next step? Did you go out, did you work for a facility, you had strength and conditioning at school? What did you do after you graduated?
I did, well, before I graduated, I did intern at the Arizona State Strength and Conditioning Center, so I got an idea of what it was like to coach on the college level in strength and conditioning. It's a completely different ball game. I have great respect for those coaches that work on the university level. That's why I think we have to be very careful at times of the context in which we recommend certain methodologies or training ideas, because certain situations allow for the best ideas to work and some aren't practical at all. It gave me insights upon what it was like to actually work with the athletes themselves, and probably one of the biggest lessons I learned, and I think is a myth that is really common, is that athletes like to train. Athletes like their sport. They don't necessarily like to train for their sport. Yeah. Especially that age group. You'd have half the guys. I remember we trained football guys at 6 a.m. Half the guys were hungover from the previous day, or they weren't even awake when they were training. So, I mean, it taught a lot about that. I sort of got the feeling, just talking to a lot of the great coaches there, that it probably wasn't the direction I wanted to go. Okay. It just seemed like it was a very political game in the university setting. It was very unstable because, for example, Arizona State, while I was there, or just after I graduated, I think they changed football coaches. Well, if the football coach wants to bring in his own guys, guess what? You're gone. Or maybe your job changes dramatically. I've had friends on the university level that have traveled basically all over the country, nothing because of what they've done, but because of coaching changes that have happened at the university. So it wasn't something I thought, between the money, the stress, and the time devotion, that was something I really wanted to do. So I went and actually started personal training right off the bat. Okay. And I started doing it. I searched out, I said, what's in there? I trained actually in two areas in Phoenix. One, Scottsdale, that had a little more money, and Chandler, that was a little more blue collar. It's interesting, the dynamics and what went into building the businesses on both sides, and ultimately, what direction I took from there.
Okay, now were you doing that on your own, or were you working at a big box gym for the personal
training?
No,
I mean, Eric, it's kind of funny. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. When I started in this industry, you were really taught to pay your dues, and so I did a lot of internships. I worked for commercial gyms for a good few years before I even contemplated getting my own place. I think this day and age is completely different than when I came about, and I think I'm not that old yet. Just it wasn't in your mindset to go graduate and boom, you're going to build a box gym. It was just too overwhelming. It was too, from a financial perspective, from a maintain client perspective, it was much safer to sort of feel your way out, find your direction, your philosophy, and refine your business marketing skills that you didn't learn in school. Actually, with the support of a commercial gym. Okay,
so how you said you were at those places doing it for a few years. At what point was it where you realized, all right, maybe I want to try doing something on my own, or venturing out and doing something different?
Well, I actually had a failure before that. I mean, I think 2 years, maybe a year and a half out of school, I got the ambition. I was still going to a lot of internship programs, and I had the false impression that what you knew as far as training was all that you needed to build a successful business. Sort of the Kevin Costner "build it and they will come" idea. So I actually ventured out and rented from a smaller training facility at first, and that was going okay. But what I found quickly was that there was going to be attrition over time. Some people had changing jobs, family things. So if you weren't out there marketing, you weren't out there working on your business and developing the strategies so that your business could long-term last. I went right back to a commercial gym where I started renting actually from a commercial gym because I wanted to maintain the visibility. And that lesson and that failure taught me to really start taking seriously the whole business development side of training.
Okay, now, what I want to know is, you were coming from the athletic side of things in school and working with athletes, and then you went out and started doing a personal training side of things. Did it really matter? Did you prefer training the athletes, or were you okay doing the personal training with general fitness?
Wow, I mean, both had a lot of pros and cons. I think it's unfortunate. I've had this discussion a lot with coaches that people sort of assume that if you're working with athletes, it's a higher quality level of training, and that's not necessarily always the case. I've worked with professional and college athletes in high school. My favorite level is probably high school. They seem to be the most open to doing things and wanting to do things. And, of course, that varies upon the area of the school and the kids themselves. College, a lot of times my impression was a lot of them didn't want to be there. Be there as far as being in the weight room. Again, like I said, they love their sport, but people don't realize that college athletics is pretty much a full-time job.
Yeah.
And then the professional athletes, shoot, I had a couple of them I knew they despised working out. They did it only because they had to. So really, comparing it to your housewives or general population, there's a lot of similarities in that both populations come in with not necessarily an excitement to work out. If they were excited and motivated to train, probably the majority of people wouldn't need you, because a lot of people will tell you they need it just from the motivational standpoint and the accountability. That gives you obviously the opportunity then to instill your philosophy and hopefully change the perception upon what you do. But I think it's really overblown, the value of training athletes. I'd rather take any motivated individual, non-athlete or athlete alike, over someone who's just doing it because they're basically dragging themselves and it's the last place they'd rather be in the world. So I know that's not really a concrete answer. I think there's a lot fewer athletes in the world than there are general population, and I've known some very high-end athletic training facilities, and I've talked to their coaches, and a lot of them still make their bread and butter off the general population. So I think a lot of coaches mistake it for a status symbol, and at times it can be wonderful working with athletes, but I can find it easily just as rewarding working with the general population.
Okay, so you were doing that at the big box centers. You had the failure you said you went through. What was the next step? Were you continuing to work at a big box gym? Did you go out and try and do your own thing while working there, or did you just basically say, all right, I'm going to stop what I'm doing now and go full force into something new?
Well, a little bit, probably about a year or so after I went back into the gym, I had an opportunity to do a joint venture with a chiropractor, and so I actually moved into his facility for a while and did all the training. And then again, that was sort of, every experience has been a life lesson type thing, and I found, and eventually it didn't work out where I then decided I had a couple options. I really thought I was at the point where if I was going to do this, now was the time as far as doing my own facility. I went in, just did it, knew from lessons in the past upon what not to do, what I needed to do to maintain it, and really just started really small as far as training equipment. Didn't go a lot of glitz, a lot of glamour. Didn't spend a lot of time on marketing outside just physically. I think people undervalue, especially in the day and age of the internet, of going out and making networks and contacts with other health professionals to develop referral sources. That ended up being really the life force of what we did.
Okay, so you went out and you just got a facility. Do you remember the size of the facility, any of the details about it?
Yeah, again, it was sort of a life lesson. After the chiropractor prospect didn't work, I actually got introduced to another gentleman who was in the chiropractic field, and he and I were going to go in a facility together. And it was about a 2,000 square foot facility, and the day before we were to move in, he bailed. So I was left with a 2,000 square foot facility that had a lot of front end office space. Our actual training area was probably in the realm of 1,400 square feet, which was more than adequate what we were doing. I mean, that was still a time where we did largely one-on-one training. I had a couple of trainers that were renting at the time. It wasn't really a lot of group stuff, so it worked out just fine.
Okay. If he bailed on you, it's a joint venture. He's obviously had some clients. You were kind of new coming into it, so what were you doing to early on get some clients to train?
Well, I sort of was hoping that some of his clients would, come over, but I also knew enough, having dealt with other health professionals in the field, that there's not necessarily always that translation. Some people, for example, in the chiropractor area, they just come in because they just want to feel good. Right. They don't want to do anything extra. They don't want to go work out. They're not going to really change their lifestyle. So obviously some of the people would have been appropriate, but a large amount wouldn't have been. So I have always been to believe, don't base your hopes and your aspirations upon what others can do for you. So we wanted to make sure we had a whole bunch of outlets. So, like I said, I really hit the pavement, meeting a lot of people in person, other chiropractors, nutritional supplement stores, health food stores, try to do seminars through these mediums where people can come in and we can give them information before we ever ask them to invest into us. So we build a level of trust and leverage ourselves as the experts in the area. We try to do unique things. We were the first people to do kettlebells in Arizona back in 2002, 2003. So, a lot of people, there was really of interest to the TV crew. So we did stories on that. Any opportunity we had to speak and get in front of people, we definitely took advantage of.
Okay, so what they consider old school now is pretty much what you were doing, going out, just getting in front of people, networking, sending out the press releases, getting media, and then doing a lot of speaking just to get in front of everybody, right?
Yeah, I think that's really underrated still. I mean, I know we have a lot of cool technology and we take advantage of it for our internet-based business, but,
Right.
people still are big relationship builders. And, they get to meet you, they get to touch you, they get to see you. It's a different type of thing than if they just saw a video you did or even just following a blog. It develops a whole different relationship with the consumer. And where we are in Phoenix, it's extremely competitive. Right now, I could walk probably 10 minutes to 10 different training studios in our area and just in the region. So that's not counting the commercial gyms.
Right.
It's definitely one of those things where you have to show value to the consumer and why they should choose you over all the other options.
When you first opened the facility, you had a partner who had dropped out, and it was just you. Was it just you and then doing
It
training?
really was.
Yeah. Okay.
It really was. I mean, I was fortunate enough. I did have one or two trainers that would end up renting shortly after.
Okay.
But even the renting perspective, I mean, you almost have to assume there's going to be turnover with that. I never really saw myself as a manager of people, so I didn't really want to go the employer route. If that was still my primary business today, I may have to reevaluate that because I've seen what the unreliability of having renters and the complications that it causes versus having employees. But fortunately for me, I was able to get into another medium that fit my personality a little bit better, and probably long term will bring me a lot more pleasure and passion.
Right. I'm a little curious about having renters because I haven't covered that yet. Because I know some people still do that where they have trainers that are basically renting the space and they're getting a percentage of it. So if you remember, can you kind of just briefly describe like some of the details of how that did work out for you and how you were running things?
Well, at the time, because of the bailout, it was just great to have some income coming in from another source.
Right.
That wasn't relying upon you working more or having to get new clients. So that was really good. The trainers, for the most part, were of the same philosophy. So it wasn't as though we were having completely contradictory, training styles in the gym. So that was pretty good because I've heard nightmare stories, the opposite way, and that becomes quite an ordeal. How it didn't work, you don't really have a lot to say as far as, for example, one gentleman I had some personality issues, let's just say, and just couldn't keep his personal stuff outside the gym. So, you come in cranky or aggravated, and that type of aura and environment just sort of really quickly infiltrates, especially a small business.
Yeah.
Clients pick up on that, other trainers pick up on that, and that can be very destructive. I think sometimes you get, if you have multiple rentees, one can feel like you have a better relationship with one than another. Maybe you're helping them out more, you're playing favorites, or, things like that. And it can get complicated because everything is a relationship in the end.
Right.
So, I think a lot of people believe the grass is greener on the other side. You get renters that go, oh man, Josh is taking this much money from me and he's training people. He just must be just rolling it. He's taking advantage of me. Which is obviously not the case. I think a lot of people are shocked by the amount of expenses it takes to actually run their own business and keep it going day after day.
Now, did you put ads out to try and find these trainers? Did they come to you? How did you get them?
I think being in the industry for a while and just being in that sort of a community, I knew quite a few people. So, at first I wanted people that I knew and trusted,
Okay.
or at least to some degree, Eventually, I opened it up to people I didn't know, and those were always tedious times because I wasn't sure their training style, wasn't sure their attitude. They could always show you their best side while they're interviewing you, and and they can be completely different after a few months,
Right.
or it can be stress or just their true personality coming out. So at the same time, the people I knew, that would end up leaving over time just because they couldn't run their own business. It was unfortunate because it was the end of some friendships because they expected you to build their business for them.
Right.
So it definitely gets complicated, and neither scenario is probably optimal. And I've known a lot of fitness professionals that probably advised against that model for a lot of the reasons I'm just discussing.
Were you bringing in clients and they were training, or did they have their own clients that they would bring in and you get the percentage? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was to a point I gotten too busy and I was referring to them. But then I found out it's like then you have to assume they're telling you about all the sessions because I was taking a percentage of the referrals, and I found out there was money hiding and money put under the table, and I always sort of found myself to be a person that was very honorable and trustworthy. That I'm not going to scam you, I'm not going to take advantage of you, but there are bills we have to pay, and God forbid I'd like to make a little money on the business myself. So I think unfortunately again people, when money comes into play, it changes the way sometimes people behave.
Did you end up going to the employees after this, or it's different contractors?
Actually, no, because of the business that we would get into with the sandbags, it became my primary business and allowed me to actually shrink the training facility because it's gotten to the point where I really don't have the time to spend a lot of hours training, and I did, and because of the opportunities that the sandbags allowed me for, it wasn't the best use of my time, even if I could keep the business going or wanted to keep the business going. So, right now we have a couple rentees. We're in a smaller facility. It works out well. We have a lot less wasted space with the front area offices that the chiropractor was going to use, and just predominantly just training space at this point.
Okay, now let's dive into the sandbags. Where did the idea come from for them?
Really, the idea came from when I got into strongman training back probably almost 10 years ago. I was still rehabbing myself from the bad low back injury I suffered in college. Nothing was really working. I was daily in pain and frustrated, and fortunately that led me to attending a lot of different corrective programs and spending a lot of time educating myself on the body and training methods that were definitely outside the box. Unfortunately, nothing really yielded the effect that I wanted myself. I got into odd object training after being suggested by a colleague of mine, and I was really intrigued by the concept. So at that time we didn't have a lot of the training implements that people have access to today. I know I'm talking like an old guy, but it was probably only like 8-10 years ago. And so we simulated a lot of the different odd object training with homemade sandbags. And I just instantly if you've been training with bars and dumbbells for a while, when you pick up something like a sandbag, it's just so dramatically different. And I just knew there was something to that, and I wanted to bring that to my clients because I felt like not only were the exercises different, but the experience of actually doing the lift was different. You could take your common lift and completely change it by using the sandbag. So we did the whole homemade thing. I would bring them into the gym, and there was a running joke I tell everybody. You could find where it was by the trail of sand that would follow us throughout the gym. And I was really close to abandoning the idea just because with the homemade versions, we weren't able to change the weight easily. So, that we have to use a lot of different bags. We didn't have a lot of control over the dimension of the bags. And that's one thing I'm sure we can talk about later is that unlike most type of weights, if you add weight to the barbell, the shape and dimension of the barbell doesn't change.
Right.
With sandbags, they can change quite dramatically and plays a role in the training scheme in of itself. It was really uncomfortable to hold on to. People would have ripped, bloody knuckles. You can imagine a lot of women weren't too enthusiastic breaking nails over it. Oh, yeah. So I was just going to regulate it just to my garage-based training where I did a lot of my strongman stuff until a friend of mine, said, "Hey, Josh, if you could make these, what would you do?" And, I hadn't even given any thought to the idea because, I'm not a manufacturer. I didn't have a business model file. I didn't sit back in my evil experimental room and think about this for years. It was literally as easy as that. And he had a guy locally to him that I said, well, this is what I would do. And that's how the first Ultimate Sandbag came about. And as soon as he sent me a sample, I was playing it with our garage and the guys I trained with, and everyone wanted one. Yeah. I was like, oh, cool, I can get a whole bunch from my friends then. And shortly after that, I was like, hey, this is different as well. And so that spawned us starting to try to create a system and change really the perception of what people had with this form of training.
Okay, now, so that first one, you actually had someone make it for you. You weren't sitting there with needle and thread trying to pull all stuff together.
Oh, God, I don't know. My friends will rarely allow me around hammers and nails, more or less, any stitching equipment. So, we had someone, a company that dealt with canvas at the time. They were seamstresses, and they produced their big business was doing boat covers for people that had boats. Cover them up over bad weather and so forth. So we went that route.
Okay, we're definitely going to get into the manufacturing side of things in a second. But I know that you started working with these, your friends and everybody wanted them. You ended up, you wrote the book, I believe it was like the Sandbag Fundamentals. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, that was my first sort of jab at like putting
Okay.
this out there and stuff. And that was about 2005. Very fortunate that Ryan Lee found it to be beneficial and put it out there. And that's where I really saw the potential that there was some need in the industry for this type of information. I mean, that ebook, those ebook sales completely shocked me as far as how many people were really about this. And then Ryan was great. He was one of the first to give me a platform to actually speak at his conferences about how were we using this implement, what were we doing, what was the system that we were implementing, and that was huge because it's sort of like the training business. Getting in front of people was so absolutely critical into conveying our message.
All right, so it was that platform that Ryan basically kind of helped launch a lot of things for you, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Ryan was perfectly supportive of that.
Okay, so once you had that platform and you realized, all right, I've got something here, what did you decide to do with it? Like, what was the next step?
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's gone probably through cycles, peaks and valleys over the years. And times I thought about quitting, I'm sure, and other times I've been more than excited. When you got in front of people and you explained the system, they got it. And, it was amazing, the enthusiasm. However, you couldn't do that same type of effect purely, once you were done with that program and you went back to trying to talk to people online or emails or forums and those type of things, there was definitely something lost in translation. A lot of it has to do with the experience and the ability to communicate those ideas. Definitely not everyone that we spoke to embraced the idea. A lot of times we were laughed off at first, like, oh, it's a bag of sand. I already know how to use a bag of sand. Then I had to remind people that most of the implements that we use and we deem are the best are not complicated in their design. I mean, a dumbbell is a bar with two weights on the ends. A kettlebell is a ball and a handle, and a barbell is a big piece of metal that you put other pieces of metal on.
Right.
It's what you do with the tools that really is where to drive the impact. So really what we started doing is I really started to realize that the problem wasn't that people weren't open to the sandbag. It's just the perception of what you did with it. And we really spent time in creating the system and how was it implemented, how you progress people, and really what was the purpose. Why were you using this? I use a similar example that I do in assessments. When people ask me about assessment protocols, I go, I'm not against assessments, but whatever you assess better change something in your program. Same thing with the sandbag. If you're going to use the sandbag, it better be because it's doing something better than anything else could do for that training method, that exercise, that movement, or that goal. Our goal is not just to get people to buy sandbags and have them sit in the corner. We really believe that we have a system that can benefit basically any type of coach.
Okay, so once you got these people, understanding and believing in the program and the system and the thing itself, early on you had the bags, but how did you determine, people wanted, but how did you end up determining a price? I mean, no one's really selling a bag at sand, like what was that whole process like trying to determine that?
Oh, that was a cluster, right up front.
Yeah.
That wasn't something I had any background in.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so many lessons, especially in that first manufacturer, and it would carry over even in today's with the manufacturer that we use. The price, I really didn't know how much we'd be selling. I thought it'd be something nice on the side. We'd sell a few bags here and there because I think overall, even though when people were intrigued, it was probably still seen as a rather hardcore training implement.
Yeah.
And even today, I don't think people truly grasp our system, and I can see that in some of the forum posts and discussions I see in regards to sandbag training in of itself. So I don't want to make it out to be like everyone just gave us a big hug and cheer when we came out with the system. We still battle to this day about educating people. But to answer your question, we just priced it a little bit more than we were going to. It cost us. We didn't take into account shipping charges, inventory, production time, staff, customer service, web stuff, distribution, any of those things. So we really probably underpriced it at the beginning, and that's a mistake people can make in that if you don't find the appropriate price, even though you're selling a lot of whatever it is that you've made, you can still go out of business because you're just not making enough. And as you grow, your expenses grow as well. So if you don't take that into account of where you want your business to be and how you ideally want it to function, I think you can definitely put yourself out of business, even though you see the sales to continue.
And early on, it was just that one bag, right? So you were trying to market the system and how to use just the one bag?
Yeah, I mean, we quickly, I think we had 2 or 3 bags right up front, basically the small, medium, large type of concept.
Okay.
Um, it was hard because, again, we were still, at first, when we first started, people were still the mindset of, you want me to pay how much for a bag of sand? I can go make one.
Right.
Uh, so we had to market both the implement itself and the training system because you had the people that would say what I just said, and then you'd have people that said, well, I know how to do sandbags, so I'll buy yours and I'll just go do what I want with it. Which was really unfortunate because, again, that wasn't our goal. And probably early on, I wouldn't have marketed it as a sandbag.
Okay.
At this day and age, at this point in our company, we're trying to change, to what we're calling dynamic variable resistance training. Not just to sound fancy and educated, but because a couple things. One is people have a preconception of what a sandbag is. And that preconception is usually a lowbrow, cheap training implement.
Right.
And we really want to change how people perceive that. And then also the training system behind it. Now it's not about lifting a sandbag. It's using this dynamic variable resistance model. Similar to, when TRX came out, it's not body weight on straps. It was suspension training because there's a specific integration implementation to the programs. And so we're following the same suit. We always try to remind people, just because you're lifting a sandbag doesn't mean you're doing sandbag training, and especially doesn't mean you're doing our type of program. So early on, it was definitely problematic on both ends, both marketing the product and marketing the idea behind it.
Well, what were you doing? Because you said you were marketing it as a sandbag early on, and then obviously you had, Ryan was helping with some of this stuff, but what else were you doing to market, to spread the word of what you were doing?
I joined a couple of mastermind groups. Once I really felt like this had some legs to it and this could be something, I really wanted to get others' opinion, people that have, done it and been there and have the know-how. Like I said, I didn't have the background on how to develop this business or what really took in this business. So one of the probably best things that I was taught early on was just really optimizing free media at the time, and the biggest one was YouTube. And consistently was a medium we knew we had to visually show people what we were talking about. I could sit here and write articles, and actually that's something I did for quite some time before and still do today, was writing articles, but people had to see it because what we were talking about was so drastically different than what they were used to. So if we just wrote and relied upon text, it was still alien to most people. So YouTube was a great medium where we started getting a lot of followers and people associating us with and the brand to the type of training.
Okay. And you had talked about what your earliest bags were like. Just kind of describe those, like, what they were like and, what kind of issues you might have had with them or what was good about them.
They were archaic at best. I mean, especially what I know now, the whole hindsight type of idea. At the time, they were phenomenal because, I take an idea of all we had at the time was said, why don't we put some handles on a bag that you could make compactly designed so it actually would meet the demands of what we'd like to do with it. So it would quickly expand the versatility both in what you could do with it and who you could use it with. I had no idea about materials. Personally, I thought, hey, making a sandbag is going to be freaking easy. And over the years, I found it to be completely the opposite and probably learned why there weren't companies making commercial sandbags for quite some time. So what I learned, I didn't know how long it would take to produce a mass quantity of them. I didn't know what we had to look as far as pitfalls upon the actual implementation, meaning that people would do things with it that I didn't think about or probably wouldn't recommend.
Okay.
So that went into sort of the whole mindset. I just thought people would just instantly start doing what we did. And, while people took what we did, they also did whatever they wanted to do. And I've always joked that people go a little bit mental when they train with sandbags, meaning that they'll do things with sandbags they would never dream of doing with their barbell, their dumbbell, or their kettlebell, and sometimes not even medicine balls. But because it's a bag of sand, they think that it's okay to do.
Right.
So I learned a lot about what it's like dealing with a manufacturer. What it's like, all the things that you have to think about: delivery times, stocking, costs, materials. What if that guy ran out of one aspect of the bag that we used to make it? How that influenced being able to deliver timely orders. It's been a large, hard training experience. I'll tell you that.
It sounds like it. Now, how did you determine what would be the right size for the bags?
Um, that's a very good question. A lot of it was just completely experimental. Um, we wanted for the medium bag to be able to probably fit in about 70, 80 pounds worth of sand pretty comfortably. So basically, the manufacturer just figured out what that shape size would be. We had one that we wanted to be able to load about 30 to 40 pounds, and one we wanted to load up to 160 pounds. So
Right. Okay.
he basically did the schematics on what that would be. Over the years, we've tweaked with that. We've played with it, here and there. And so it's always a work in progress. And I always tell people, if we find a way of doing something better, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Some people, they joke, my wife and I laugh. We see there's a commercial going on, someone just buys a computer and the new one comes out, or someone's delivering the 3D TV and the 4D TV trucks driving by. So that feeling like, oh, dang it, I just bought your stuff and now you've changed it, you bastard. And really, there's no good way of introducing a new design because someone's buying at some point, and
Right.
we can't stop things going. We're thinking about doing this, so hold off for about 3 to 6 months, and we'll let you know what happens.
Right. Right.
We do what we know is best at the time, and we're fortunate enough to work with better manufacturers and better people now, so we get better insights upon what those things could be. But early on, it was completely experimental. He'd make it, we'd play with it, we okayed it, and that's probably one of the mistakes that I made early on is I probably would have spent way more time working with the products myself, getting more products to other people first, as far as just getting them to work with them and to find out the pitfalls, what they liked, what they didn't like about it, and seeing if those were things that we could change. At times I've been at conferences where people go, Josh, you know what you should do? You should change this, and I go, it's a good idea. It'd probably bring another $150 cost to the product. So if you're willing to pay an extra $150, I'm willing to do that. So sometimes what we'd like to do is also cost prohibitive. We know our market, and the whole idea was to make this highly accessible, not only in the training, but in the financial commitment that people were going to put into it. So, that had to go in consideration of everything that we do.
Okay, now I want to dive into the manufacturing side of it because I know there are people watching that, are looking to create their own products and, maybe need people to help create them for them. Now, you'd mentioned your first manufacturer. Was it a friend of yours that had done it, or
No.
how did you find your first manufacturer?
My friend found the manufacturer, but I had no relationship with the gentleman at the time. So, like I said, he just worked with a lot of stitching of different materials, canvas, being one of them. So, sandbags have always been made out of canvas, so that's what we first went with. It wouldn't take us too long to figure out that probably wasn't ideal. And, working with then different manufacturers opened up. See, every manufacturer, too, is a little different in what resources they have available themselves and their experiences. This gentleman had no idea upon our implementation of the product. He could only sort of guess. He worked, he was kind of a smaller business himself. So, we tried, we took his advice on everything that came as far as the actual production of the product, versus our manufacturer now. They work 95% with the military. So the resources they have, the experiences they have, the engineers they have are completely different. Our first few manufacturers had no engineers on staff. And now that's something that we have access to, so we can get a little more feedback. If we do this, how is it going to impact that? Is what we have the best qualities, the best durability? Because, the answer may be yes from your manufacturer, but that manufacturer may not have the resources or the ability to get you the better stuff, if you will.
How many manufacturers have you gone through up to this point?
Probably close to 10.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, and it's not something I ever wanted to do, but it's almost like a relationship in every case. Some of it's been due to the fact that we just simply outgrown them and they couldn't keep up with production. Some we just didn't like what they were building or how they were going about envisioning what we wanted. So it varied upon why we left different manufacturers. We've tried stuff overseas in the past, had complete fiascos with that. We've done stuff here and have had challenges, in its own right. So just because it's done in America doesn't make it necessarily easy to do either. Recently we just went through a bad experience where our primary manufacturer, because they do deal with largely military orders, they had a large military order come up, which bumped our production time. So now we're 2 weeks behind on stock we were expecting to receive. which impacts our sales and ability to deliver to our customers, which is incredibly frustrating because, we take what the manufacturer tells us as far as the lead times and so forth, and we take that's not going to change. And unfortunately, it does at times, and we have nothing that we can really, do about it. That's why sometimes we maintain multiple manufacturers at a time. Okay. So if something like that happens, we can try to jump to another one. But it's hard because, we'll find that one manufacturer just ever so slightly changes the dimension of our product, or they don't have access to the same materials, so the materials aren't necessarily always consistent, not meaning that they're bad, but they're not consistent. So it's definitely been a struggle, and now we're in the works with joining forces with a very large equipment manufacturer that hopefully will sort of solve all of our problems.
Okay, you touched on some of the struggles with manufacturers, but what have been the biggest hurdles you've had to deal with them? I mean, you talked about sometimes they'll push your orders back, they'll change materials on you, but what else are some of the things that you've had to deal with them?
Those are pretty big things.
Yeah, obviously.
Them. I'll give you a scenario. This is probably about, maybe 5 years ago. We were working with a manufacturer, and I got a call from our customer service rep, who was quite concerned that she was getting a large amount of complaints that people were having problems with their bags. And it was really unusual. So, in speaking with the manufacturer about it, we found out that he thought it was going to be a good idea to save us a couple dollars if he changed the type of thread that we used. So the thread he was using wasn't as strong and wasn't able to hold up as well. So he cost us money, not just in that, but in replacing the product to people, because I always tell people, I've been a customer most of my life, so I know what it's like to invest your hard money into something and be excited about something. So we always try to take care of our customers. So not only that, but then you have to rebuild the relationship with the customer.
Right.
And that's very hard to do, because once that trust is broken, that's something that we take very seriously. That's why we try to go above and beyond, is that person, you lost a potential customer for life. And as the social media outlets have grown, people have a very easy ability to vocalize their dismay, and they won't give the full story. For example, if your bag broke and we offered, to fix it in the next day or to replace it, some people will be fine with that. Some people would have been, off on Facebook or any medium going, "Oh, my guys bought a bag from Josh and it broke. He's such a liar," and they won't tell you the fact that you were willing to replace it and you were willing to help them out. So unfortunately, that's a big deal, especially in today's internet-based society. Other issues, the delivery times are a big deal. At this point, we have such a high demand for our product, and we're trying to fill distributor orders, our own customers, and affiliates that, a 2-week delay is huge, and sometimes like now, same situation, we've had to go back to customers that have already purchased and go, "Hey, we're sorry, there's been a really unexpected delay, and guess who the bad guy is? It's us." Yep. So, although it had absolutely nothing in our control to do, and we had planned it out perfectly, something that's out of our control, we're still going to be the bad guys. So I think people need to be aware of that, people have a different way of perceiving everything you do. And once you start selling something and there's an exchange of money, I think the expectations change upon that relationship as well. So, those are probably two of the really big things. And from a manufacturing perspective, I would say another big thing, and probably related to the patent stuff we sort of alluded to before, was just making sure that we had contracts in place saying that this is our concept. You can't produce this without our permission. There was one company I can think of, at least, that, about a year after we left them, and we had that type of agreement sort of verbally, one of my life lessons there, they started making our product and selling it against us.
Wow.
So, I've unfortunately found this side of the industry is probably as sleazy as it gets, to be very honest.
You'd said two things that were interesting to me before previously. You talked about how the manufacturer had changed the thread, and another one, how he changed dimensions. Did they just go and do that without asking you, or do you have to sign off on that?
No. It's one of those things, Eric. It's really tough, and we've been really, sort of adamant about, we want to create consequences to these companies for doing such things. But realistically, you'll get into he said, she said fights. You'll get into, for example, the thread thing. They'll be like, "Oh, I was just doing the best I thought that was for you." And they're not big enough. They're not going to take the responsibility. And if that's your only manufacturer at the time, you're kind of up, what's creek, because it takes time then. I mean, it could take 3 months to get a new manufacturer.
Wow.
Because what you need, here's the process in a nutshell. You have to get a signed contract saying they won't share the idea first. Some companies will do that, some won't. So that's an elimination process. Then you actually have to send them the sample. They'll break it down, examine it, tell you how much it'll cost to do. And that could be a 2 to 3 week time span. So usually you're throwing it out to several different companies because you're trying to maximize your time. Then you're going to ask for a sample. And depending upon where you fall on their priority list, it could be really fast, it could be really slow. So that could be another 2 to 3 week time frame just to get the sample. Then you actually want to work with the sample probably 2 weeks to see if it is what you've asked for. Because I've worked with companies that I've asked for a specific material, and I get the material in, and it's tangibly different than what I'm used to, and they'll tell me it's the same exact thing. So you want to make sure the durability is the same. You want to make sure it's up to your standards, and then there's time to then put into production, which for us has always been anywhere from a 6 to 10 week time frame. So it's quite cumbersome. So if you get mad at your manufacturer, it could be a good thing that you eventually leave. But what's going to happen is if you have an ongoing business like we do, that could take you a minimum of 3 months to actually accomplish, if not longer.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Just waiting on them now. What is, because you've dealt with this a lot now, if someone was going to have a product of theirs created, they're looking for manufacturers, what would be your biggest piece of advice?
Wow, that's a very good question, because there's a lot of things that pop in my mind, and it probably largely depends upon what their vision is of the project. I'll be flat out honest with you. A manufacturer is only going to work as hard as you're willing to invest in them. What do I mean? They're only going to work hard if you're a big-time producer of the equipment. Otherwise, you're going to drop in their priority list pretty hard. So you're going to be probably prey to some of those problems I talked about, whether it's delayed, production times, shipping out, getting those samples in. It's amazing. Once you start committing more money to them, all of a sudden you rise in that priority list. So it's one of those things where, your parents tell you early on, life's not fair. You better get used to it. It doesn't matter how good you think your product is and how much it's going to change the industry until you're able to financially commit a large amount of money to people. They don't really care about, what you're doing. They care about, how much money they're going to make for you. I know that sounds cold and harsh, but that's the reality. So I would find someone, maybe if you don't know where you're going to take your project, start smaller. Because smaller businesses, may make you more of a priority because they're grateful to have your business. I would definitely, get contracts signed as far as, maintaining the rights to your idea. It's amazing. I've seen people shop our ideas around all the time. I've been at conferences where people are actively shopping around our stuff. I'll give you a really quick story. 2 instances. One, where one of our manufacturers thought we were punking him, as he said, because he actually had someone walk into him, set up a meeting, and basically give the design of our bag and want to know how much it was going to be to make it.
Wow.
Fortunately, we've had a contract with him, and he was not going to make it for them, but it doesn't mean they're going to stop shopping around.
Right.
We had another group, one of the knockoff companies went to one of our manufacturers and wanted to get quotes on materials and stuff like that. So, you want to get those contracts in hand, because even if you think it's going to be maybe even a small idea, if you have any type of success, people notice and they're going to want to copy it.
Right.
So I would take your time, not only finding the right manufacturer, take time working with your product. If you really think it has potential, to start with that patent right off the bat. Save yourself a lot of headache. Try to really try to work through maybe a series of 3 to 4 manufacturers and see which one you like the best. Get ideas, get written out timelines or expectations that both of your companies have, so you have something to refer to if you ever have an issue. That way you do have something that you can sit back and go, hey, we have a contract that says you deliver in 4 weeks. If you're on week number 6, I either get a discount or something as a consequence for them being late or pushing off your stuff. One thing I found that was very interesting is once you approve the design and the production of the equipment, the manufacturer washes their hands of any liability as far as it breaking or anything like that. So once you sort of decide that you're going to put something in the marketplace, be really sure that's what you want. Make sure it's pretty well tested. And like I said, give it to a good handful of people that you trust to give you some honest feedback.
You talked about patents and copyrights before. When you first had the idea for the sandbags and you went and found your first manufacturer, did you go out and be like, I got to put a patent and apply for a patent right away, or did you wait a while?
No, I wish I did.
Okay.
I didn't. That was probably the biggest mistake we've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a couple things, Eric. It was I really didn't have any idea how big this could be. And, it's amazing what it has become, which I feel very fortunate for. But it could be even bigger if we took the precautions ahead of time. It's an extremely expensive process. So, again, for something that at the time we didn't know how big it would be, we just didn't honestly think that was a worthy investment. It's a pretty significant investment. And then the third thing is it takes a very long time, and no one can really give you a timeline of how long that could be. Our patent's been pending for almost 2 years.
Okay.
And you know what? It's a waiting game. I read somewhere where Facebook was waiting 3.5 years for one of their items to be approved. So that potentially, if you take the Facebook model, you could be sitting on your product for 3.5 years before you ever deliver in the marketplace. Like I said, if you have any type of success with it, people will knock it off, and they will challenge you to sue them or any of those things. And I've been forewarned by even companies that do have their patents in place. It's an expensive process to keep trying to hunt down everybody that doesn't, and sort of infringe on the patent or the trademarks. You got to really make sure that it's something that you can make hold up in court and that really is valid. And it doesn't, and you want to find out how people can get around your patent, because people are pretty clever about that as well. So that was the other concern, was were we going to have a design that wasn't going to be easy to get around the patent? And fortunately, we invested the money into a good patent attorney, and the amount of work that they do is actually worth the investment, because the intricacies of how things are designed and and the intention of their use is very critical in sort of protecting your patent.
Okay, now, again, because there's a lot of people, myself included, I don't have any products or haven't been created. You apply for the patent. Right now, yours is pending. Since it's pending, is that still protecting it? What is that? No? Okay, so you could have people come out and basically just knock off your stuff since it's just pending. You don't actually have the patent.
Oh, yeah, we've had that consistently happening for the last probably 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
All you can do is send them a cease and desist and say it is pending. But as far as your legal rights, they can do whatever they want until it actually goes through. And the advice that we were given by our patent attorney was not to follow that route of getting cease and desist letters, because you can go ahead and argue a applied patent. Okay. So we're just sort of letting it go through. We don't need to develop hoopla and delay the process even further. So we'd rather sort of just, as a lot of my mentors tell me, focus over what we have control over, try the best we can, and hopefully when the patent does come out, it will protect us. But, what I find, Eric, too, is, Dan John sort of gave the analogy of squirrels. You open up some of the equipment catalogs and there are a lot of squirrels, a lot of distractions for when you do. So even if, some of the products that are competition to us aren't even similar in design, it's just the fact it's a like product. It's still filled with sand, or it's a odd object. So those are all things that, can definitely impact your business and have no relevancy to the patent itself.
Okay, I want to kind of find out just a couple of the details about the actual behind-the-scenes part of the business here with the sandbags. You have them manufactured. They get them. Do they drop ship them, or do they ship them to you and then you distribute them from your place?
We distribute from our place. Okay. Most manufacturers won't drop ship. There's a few that will, but But then you have to take into account, like, we have instructions, we have bonus features, like we give them DVDs, we give instructional booklets. So they would have to have all that warehoused themselves. Most manufacturers don't want to do that. Some will be willing to do that, but it's an extra added expense to your business model that will influence, guess what, your price. It's one of those things that we chuckle at, over here, that people go, this is what you're charging me. I go, well, yes, we're charging you for the quality of the bag, but we're also charging you for what it costs to produce, the DVDs, put the marketing behind it, the stuff that makes the business go. Because if we just charged you for the cost of the implement, we would be out of business.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't figure those things in. They don't figure in to their price. Okay, so we have it shipped to us. That has to be figured into our price. What is the cost in shipping the product to us? What's the cost in putting the boxes together and shipping them out? Both manpower and producing the materials.
Right.
For example. So there's a lot to consider, and I would recommend people start really easy and small first to economize their expenses and figure out what they could do. We found that if we increased our price by $5, sales just dropped.
Wow.
It's kind of funny that something as simple as $5 made such a difference with people, but it did. So we got a good gauge of our market upon what people are willing to pay and what the market is demanding and so forth.
Okay, and just in case people were watching, they don't know, I talked about drop shipping. Drop shipping is basically the manufacturer has it and they ship straight from their facility. So you're not doing that; they're shipping it to you, and then you ship everything out with the products and the systems along with it, minus the sand, right? You're not shipping with the sand.
We're not shipping sand. I mean, that surprises people sometimes, but even shipping 40 pounds worth of sand would be an enormous cost to them.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that. But yeah, just to hit on that point again, the drop shipping. For us, we go through several thousand sandbags a month. So for them to then accommodate that, it could be very problematic. We started early on with a fulfillment house that did largely digital stuff,
right?
But they were willing to stock our stuff and do the fulfillment, and we found there were a lot of mistakes in filling the orders. And then guess what? Guess who the bad guy is again? You are.
Yeah.
And if you open it up for international shipping, and now you have international customers that need to get more stuff, it adds up fast. Adds up really fast. So that's why it takes time to do all those things the right way. So I would definitely tell people to really do their homework, and if they have to sort of take a little bit more on themselves initially, then to do so. That shouldn't be your long-term goal, but that maybe have to be a reality up front.
Okay, we're going to wrap up in a bit here. Want to talk to you about one or two more things, which I think is interesting, because it's not just the sandbags now. I mean, you've created this into a systemized process, which is, a systemized business. For example, you now have a certification course. All right, so where'd the idea come from to run a certification course in sandbags?
Largely YouTube. The reason being because so many people do it badly. It was a couple of reasons. I mean, to be serious about it, YouTube's interesting again because you get to see how other people are implementing your stuff. I mean, we've had some loyal followers and people that are using our stuff and they're making videos of it, and you see the deficiencies that people have. So there actually is a need for people to be taught. A lot of times, even some of the high-level coaches that we've talked to, because we're stepping so outside of the box, they don't understand how it fits into a system of itself. So that need and that frustration of people not understanding why they're doing what they're doing was the direct reason for the certification. And it was the whole idea behind the Sandbag is to give trainers a better solution to train with their clients. So we wanted to take people through the steps of why this works, how does it work, and how do you implement it so that you can get maximized success, because this simple object can do wonders for you if you know how to use it correctly. And that's been a tough message to convey, because I know when I first got into this industry during certifications was thought much more of an educational process. Nowadays, more of a user's course on different implements, and a lot of people become cynical. But we do delve into a lot in the programming and show people how it applies to a lot of the problems they come in coaching. So it's been a growing process. We've getting a lot more international appeal and speaking a lot more conferences. But really, it stems from the fact that people would buy the bag and didn't really know what to do with it.
Okay.
And we wanted to give people a better idea of the purpose behind it. There's still a lot of people that fall into that category. We didn't want people to buy this handbag and just leave it in the side of their gym. That doesn't do us any good. It only helps us if people are using it and they're getting a great result from it.
Okay, so once they buy bags, maybe some of the DVDs, do you have the certification course? Maybe, hey, as an upsell, you might want to look into this to, improve things.
We're working more and more on. It's a little bit overwhelming to a lot of people. We've started delving into a lot of different markets now. Now we have a lot more end users, so
Mm-hmm.
people that go to the gym themselves or are using it for themselves at home. And to be honest, I mean that's potentially a market for certification, but more than likely it's probably going to be fitness professionals
Right.
and marketing to the two different groups. It is a challenge because again you have to speak to them differently. And the fitness professionals, oddly, I was just thinking about this before we got on the phone call, are more resistant than the end users. The end users almost get it more as
Mm-hmm.
far as the ability to do more with it and for it to be a problem solver. And I think the fitness professional comes in as far more the cynic.
Okay. All right. Well, what I want to do is I just kind of want to wrap up. I've covered a lot of really cool things here. You've done, the manufacturing side was really important. You went into a lot of detail about that, but I want people to know more about Sandbags, you yourself. So where can they go to find out this information?
They can go to our website, ultimatesandbagtrain.com. There they can find all the products, but more importantly, we have a blog that we update pretty regularly, at least twice a week, and we usually try to insert some instructional video, if not workouts with that, and that's all a free resource because, like I said, our goal is to get people to understand what they can do with the training system.
Awesome. And the one thing I want to finish on, I'm curious because you've been through, some very unique challenges in getting this up to the level that it's at. Usually there's multiple of this, but what's been the biggest failure that you've had in trying to build yourself to a successful level? Tough
I
question.
just think, yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think it's just not having the know-how or the experience to launch this type of business. Just not being educated enough upon what the processes were and what to expect from manufacturing and distribution. Because I could break down all those subcategories into long
Mm-hmm.
lessons. If I were someone coming to market with a product, I'd try to find someone you can trust, you can lean on, who's done it already, and give you advice of the pitfalls to avoid and things to consider, so that you don't have to learn so many things for yourself. I mean, it's always good to do
Right.
so. At the same time, you can save yourself a heck of a lot of money. I'll tell you, Eric, up front, we've never told anyone this. We have actually thrown out into the dumpster over $50,000 worth of equipment
Wow.
because we meet our standards or we found a problem with it.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a lot of money,
That's a lot of money. Yeah.
and we
Very
weren't
cool.
going to pass that. We weren't going to pass bad equipment to our customers, and those type of things almost put us out of business at the time. So it's a matter of really finding probably a group of people, someone who can tell you from the production side, someone who can tell you the distribution side, someone who can tell you the legal side of things. Because probably most people that want to come to market, they're like us. They're coaches or trainers that are really passionate about what they're doing. They see a solution to a problem, and they're excited to get out in the marketplace. But that same excitement can be their ultimate downfall if they don't do the right steps to protecting themselves and being prepared for what I always say when people say yes.
Wow. That's some great information here, man. Josh, I really appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck with everything. And as always, let me know if there's anything I can do for you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I greatly appreciate it.